the poor janitor warned the millionaire. Please do not sign that, and what he did next shocked everyone. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let us return to our main character. Late afternoon sunlight filtered through the glass walls of Langford Corporation, a towering building that smelled faintly of marble polish and money. Down on the 32nd floor, where the air was colder and quieter, Maria Alvarez, the cleaning lady, wrung out her mop and tried not to look at the people in suits rushing past. She had worked there for 6 years, long enough to know when something in the air felt wrong. Today, it did. In the boardroom ahead, she heard voices, low, tense, urgent. The door stood open just a few inches. Through the gap, she caught sight of Edward Langford, the company's founder, his silver hair neat, his pen poised above a thick stack of papers. Across from him, a younger man in a tailored gray suit leaned forward, smiling too easily. "Just sign here, sir," the man said smoothly. "We need this merger finalized before the markets close." Maria frowned. She had seen that face before, the head of finance, Mr. Donovan, the one who always left his shredded documents half stuck in the bin. A week ago, she had pulled out a torn page with numbers that did not match any of the ledgers she had seen while cleaning. She had tucked the pieces into the small notebook she kept in her apron, the one she used to jot down misplaced items and maintenance notes. Something about it had bothered her ever since. Now, as Edward Langford reached for the pen, a chill ran down her spine. Her hands trembled, the mop handle slick with sweat. Her mind screamed to stay quiet, she was just the janitor. But her conscience, the one that had cost her a job years ago when she spoke up about another lie, refused to stay silent. She stepped closer to the door, her heart hammered, and then in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, "Please, do not sign that." The room went still. Edward turned sharply, surprise flickering in his blue eyes. Donovan's smile vanished. For a moment, nobody moved. Maria stood frozen, clutching her mop, her throat dry. Edward's voice broke the silence. "What did you just say?" She swallowed hard. "Sir, I am sorry, but I think that document is wrong." A heavy pause filled the air. The millionaire's gaze softened, not with anger, but curiosity. The woman before him was trembling, yet her eyes held something he had not seen in a long time. Honesty without an agenda. He set the pen down slowly. "Bring that document to my office," he said quietly to Donovan, whose face had gone pale. Then he looked at Maria again. "And you? Stay right here." The whispers from the hallway grew louder as people peeked in. Maria's pulse raced. She had just interrupted a deal worth millions. Maybe she had just signed her own termination. But deep down, beneath the fear, was a strange calm, because she knew she had done the right thing. Edward Langford sat alone in his office as the city lights flickered below, 1,000 reflections dancing across the glass walls. The boardroom incident replayed in his mind again and again. The janitor's trembling voice, the warning, the way she had stood there, terrified yet unflinching, it would not leave him. Edward had built his fortune on precision contracts and numbers, not on instincts. But something about that woman's honesty had cut through the noise of his world. He reached for the phone and called security. "Find out who that cleaning lady is," he said quietly. "Maria Alvarez." "She works the night shift," came the answer minutes later. Edward nodded slowly. "Tell her to come to my office tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock. The next day, Maria woke before sunrise. She barely slept. The fear of being fired hung over her like a shadow. Her teenage son, Lucas, noticed her unease while tying his worn sneakers. "Mom, are you okay?" She smiled faintly. "I will be fine, Mio. Just focus on school." She packed his lunch, brushed a tear she did not mean to shed, and caught the early bus downtown. When she arrived at the Langford Tower, the receptionist's eyes widened. "Mr. Langford asked for you," she said, almost whispering. The elevator ride to the top floor felt endless. Her reflection in the mirrored walls showed a woman who looked older than her years, gray strands escaping her, bun hands rough from bleach and soap. At 10 sharp she stepped into the office. Edward stood by the window, his back straight, his voice calm but heavy with meaning. "Maria, please sit down." She hesitated, clutching her notebook. "Sir, if this is about yesterday, I am truly sorry." "I did not mean to interrupt." He raised a hand gently. "You saved me, Maria. That document was a trap. Our financial director tried to shift company assets into a fake subsidiary. If I had signed, I would have lost everything." Her breath caught. I saw something strange before, and I could not stay quiet." Edward studied her, genuinely moved. "You were right to speak. Most people would not risk their job to tell the truth." She lowered her eyes. "Sometimes the truth costs too much." He nodded slowly. "And sometimes it saves everything." He pressed a button on his desk. "Security already removed Donovan this morning. We are reviewing every contract he touched." Then his tone softened. "I need someone I can trust to help me check the rest of our records." "You kept notes, did you not?" Maria blinked. "Yes, sir. It is nothing fancy, just a small book." "Bring it," Edward said. "Starting today, you will assist our internal audit team." Her heart stopped for a moment. "Assist, sir, I am just a janitor." "Not anymore," he replied. "Honesty is worth more than any degree. I could use more people like you." For the first time in years, Maria felt the warmth of recognition instead of invisibility. She walked out of that office with shaking hands, the little notebook clutched against her chest. The elevator doors closed, and tears welled in her eyes, not of fear this time, but of quiet relief. Outside, the morning sun spilled across the city. Edward watched from his window as the janitor he nearly overlooked disappeared into the crowd below. He did not know it yet, but that one whisper had just changed both their lives forever. Weeks passed, and Maria's world slowly transformed. Instead of mops and buckets, she now carried files, spreadsheets, and her small black notebook that had once saved the company. Her new desk was modest, tucked into the corner of the internal audit department, but to her it felt like a palace. The first morning she sat there, the team stared. A few whispered, "A janitor, promoted by the CEO." It sounded like a rumor that should not be real. Yet Edward Langford had made it official with a single memo. Maria worked quietly, learning how to cross-check reports, highlight inconsistencies, and trace hidden patterns of fraud. Every evening, she stayed late reading through old contracts until her eyes blurred. What others saw as tedious, she treated like purpose. The same hands that once scrubbed marble floors now uncovered numbers that did not belong. Edward often passed by her desk in the evenings. Sometimes he brought her coffee. Sometimes he only paused to ask, found something new. Their conversations were brief but carried respect. Maria noticed how different he seemed from the distant figure she used to see on the big screen during corporate meetings. He no longer looked untouchable. He looked human. One night, as the office emptied and the city lights shimmered outside, Maria found an irregular file, an offshore payment signed months ago under Donovan's supervision. The transfer linked back to a charity name she had never heard of. She highlighted the line, heart pounding. This was not just one man's fraud, it was a network. She printed the documents and placed them carefully in a folder labeled Pending Review. When she brought the file to Edward the next morning, he listened carefully, his expression grave. "You are saying this foundation does not exist," Maria nodded. "Not legally, sir. The address is a vacant lot." He leaned back, exhaling. "So this goes deeper." She hesitated. "If you go after the rest, they will not stay quiet." Edward gave a faint smile. "Then, it is time they learned who really runs this company." Over the following weeks, the investigation widened. Several senior managers were quietly removed. The boardroom buzzed with whispers again, but this time not about the janitor. It was about integrity, returning to the top floor. Despite the pressure, Maria never took credit. She still took the bus every morning, still brought her lunch in a small plastic box, and still called her son each evening to ask if he had done his homework. But her confidence grew. One afternoon as she was leaving, Edward stopped her by the elevator. "You have changed this company more than any consultant ever could," he said. Maria shook her head. "I just did what anyone should do." He smiled softly. "That is what makes it so rare." When the elevator doors closed, she caught her reflection in the metal. The woman staring back no longer looked invisible. She looked capable, alive, and unafraid. That night, as the city quieted, Edward stood in his office alone. On his desk lay Maria's old notebook, now enclosed in a clear case. He touched it gently. It was a reminder that sometimes the smallest voice in the room carried the power to change everything. Autumn came, painting the city in shades of amber and gold. Inside Langford Corporation, the air felt different now, less tense, less secretive. Maria walked through the hallways carrying folders instead of cleaning supplies, and for the first time people smiled at her instead of walking past. Yet even as her life began to settle, a quiet unease grew inside her. Rumors had started to swirl again, this time not about the corruption that once plagued the company but about her. Some employees whispered that she had only risen because Edward Langford favored her. Others said she was a pawn in a public relations stunt to make the millionaire look humble. Every whisper found its way to her ears. She ignored them at first, but words had a way of sticking where they hurt the most. One morning, she arrived at her desk to find a folded newspaper on top. The headline read, "From Mop to Power, the CEO's Mysterious Ally." Her name was printed underneath. Her hands trembled as she read the words. There were photos of her walking beside Edward in the corridor, smiling faintly as he handed her a file. The article twisted it into something else, something scandalous. Maria's eyes stung. She closed the paper and hurried out of the office. Edward found her standing near the elevators, eyes red, voice shaking. "I never wanted this attention," she said. "I just wanted to do my job." Edward took the paper from her hands, scanned the front page, and sighed deeply. "Maria, you have done nothing wrong. People who fear honesty will always find new ways to attack it. They are saying things that are not true," she whispered. "I know," he said softly. "And I will handle it." That afternoon, Edward called for a company-wide meeting. The auditorium filled quickly, tension thick in the air. Cameras flashed as reporters crowded the back. Maria stood quietly at the edge of the stage, unsure why he had asked her to attend. "There has been talk about favoritism, about motives, about image," he began. "But the truth is simpler than all of that. Months ago, one person in this building had the courage to stop me from making a mistake that could have destroyed everything. She spoke up when no one else did, not because she wanted recognition, but because she believed in what was right." He turned toward Maria and gestured for her to join him. The room fell silent as she stepped forward, hesitant and wide-eyed. Edward continued. "Integrity is not built in boardrooms. It is built in small moments of courage. And today this company stands stronger because of her." The crowd rose in applause. Cameras flashed again, but this time the light felt warm, not cruel. Maria's heart pounded as she tried to speak, but words failed her. Edward placed a hand over the glass case on the podium. Inside was her old notebook, the one that had once exposed the lies. "She did not just clean floors," Edward said quietly. "She cleaned the truth." The applause grew louder, echoing through the hall. Maria's eyes filled with tears, but she held her head high. For the first time in her life, she was not invisible. She was seen, heard, and respected. When the meeting ended, Edward walked beside her down the corridor. "You see," he said gently, "honor always speaks louder than gossip." Maria nodded, her voice soft but sure. "Then let us keep it that way." Outside, the golden leaves fell softly against the glass walls, as if the city itself was applauding too. Winter settled over the city, with a quiet chill wrapping Langford Tower in silver mist. The applause from that company meeting had faded, but its echoes still lingered in Maria's heart. Life returned to a steady rhythm, though nothing felt quite the same. She had been promoted officially as an ethics compliance officer. Her name was now printed on the glass door of her small office. Every morning she paused outside that door, touched the letters gently, and whispered a quiet promise to stay true to the person who once dared to speak up. Edward Langford's trust in her had deepened. They now worked side by side on rebuilding corporate culture from within. Together, they launched a new initiative called the Integrity Project, a mentorship program to help employees at every level voice concerns without fear. Maria became its living symbol. Employees who once avoided her now came seeking guidance. Her days were full, her nights peaceful. For the first time, she felt her life had meaning far beyond survival. Yet, not everyone celebrated this change. In the shadows of the company, a few former associates of Donovan, still lingered. They resented the new system that exposed old habits. One of them, a senior contractor named Blake, began spreading false reports to undermine the new program. Maria noticed discrepancies in his invoices and brought them to Edward's attention. "You think he is still connected to Donovan's network?" Edward asked quietly. Maria nodded. "It feels the same. Quiet money always has the same smell." They launched a discreet review. Within weeks, the truth surfaced. Blake had been diverting company funds through shell vendors, reviving the same pattern Donovan once used. Edward faced him in a tense meeting with Maria present. The contractor's composure cracked when confronted with evidence. "You will not get away with this," he spat. Edward's tone was calm but final. "I already have. The difference this time is that we listened to the right people." When the authorities escorted Blake out, the office seemed to exhale. Maria stood by the window afterward, watching the snowfall blur the city lights. "It never really ends, does it?" she murmured. Edward joined her, his voice gentle. "Corruption does not end, Maria. But integrity grows stronger every time someone chooses it." She turned to look at him, her eyes reflecting both exhaustion and pride. "Then I will keep choosing it." He smiled. "That is why I trust you." Later that evening, as the building emptied, Maria walked through the lobby alone. The janitors were starting their shifts, mopping the same marble floors she once scrubbed. One of them, a young woman named Claire, looked up nervously as Maria approached. "Ma'am, I heard your story," she said softly. "It gives me hope." Maria's smile was warm and understanding. "Do not call me ma'am. I used to be right where you are. Just remember, doing the right thing might not make you rich, but it will always make you free." Outside, the snow fell heavier, coating the sidewalks in white. Edward watched from the top floor as Maria stepped out into the winter evening, her scarf fluttering against the wind. In his heart, he knew that the company's greatest fortune was not measured in dollars, but in the courage of one woman who dared to whisper, "Do not sign that." As Maria disappeared into the snow, her story had already become part of something larger. A reminder that even the smallest act of honesty could spark a chain of justice that no storm could ever erase. Spring came softly to the city, washing away the cold and the long nights of winter. The streets below Langford Tower bloomed with color, and for Maria Alvarez, life felt like it had finally opened into light. Her work on the Integrity Project had reached national attention. Newspapers that once questioned her now praised her courage. She never sought fame, but she understood that her story had become a symbol, one ordinary woman who had changed a company built by the powerful. One morning, as she reviewed new employee reports, Edward Langford walked into her office holding a letter sealed with the company crest. "Maria," he said, his tone both proud and careful, "we received an invitation from the State Business Ethics Council. They want us to speak about our program at their annual conference." Maria looked up, startled. "Us," he nodded. "They want to hear from both of us. You are the heart of this initiative." The conference hall was vast and glittering. When Maria took the stage beside Edward, she could feel hundreds of eyes watching. Her palms sweated, but her voice was steady as she began. "I was once a janitor here. I did not plan to expose corruption, and I never thought I would stand in front of you today. I only knew that if I stayed silent, I would become part of the lie." Her words drew quiet nods from the crowd. She spoke not as an expert, but as a witness of truth. By the time she finished, the audience rose in applause that felt like thunder. After the speech, reporters asked for interviews. Edward stepped aside, letting Maria answer. He knew this was her moment. Later, as they left the hall, he said softly, "You have given people something I never could believe, that change is possible." She smiled. "You gave me the chance to try." Back at the company, the board of directors gathered for their quarterly meeting. Edward had an announcement. Effective immediately, he said Maria Alvarez will serve as Director of Corporate Integrity. The room was silent for a beat before applause broke out. Maria sat frozen, overwhelmed. Edward looked at her with quiet pride. "You earned this, Maria. No one else could lead it better." That evening, Maria visited her old neighborhood. She stopped by the small apartment building where she and her son had once struggled to pay rent. Lucas, now in college, met her on the sidewalk. "You did it, Mom," he said, hugging her tightly. "No," she replied softly, "we did it." She handed him a new set of apartment keys. "I kept my promise. You will never have to worry again." As they walked together under the soft spring rain, Maria looked up at the gray sky breaking into sunlight. Life had taken her from the lowest floor of a tower to the top, but what she carried now was not pride, it was peace. Across town, Edward stood by his office window, watching the city he had built. On his desk, the framed notebook, the same one Maria once used to record lies, rested like a silent monument. He touched the glass and whispered, "One voice saved us all." Maria never sought wealth or recognition. She only wanted to do what was right, and in doing so, she became the quiet revolution that changed everything. Her story spread beyond Langford Corporation, reminding people everywhere that integrity has no title and courage needs no permission to speak. Summer arrived bright and heavy, bringing with it the hum of new beginnings. For Maria Alvarez, the days passed quickly, filled with meetings, audits, and mentoring sessions. The Integrity Project had grown beyond Langford Corporation. Other companies reached out asking for guidance, wanting to learn how to build workplaces founded on honesty. Maria found herself traveling, often sharing her story across states, but she never forgot where it all began, the janitor's closet on the 32nd floor. Edward Langford remained her constant ally. Their working relationship had become a quiet friendship built on mutual respect. They often met early in the mornings before the office filled to discuss progress over coffee. Maria still preferred hers black, no sugar. Edward always added too. One morning, he said thoughtfully, "Do you ever think about how different things might have been if you had stayed silent?" She smiled faintly. "I think about it every day. But silence is a slow kind of death. It kills the part of you that knows right from wrong." That afternoon, as they prepared for another internal review, a message came from the legal department. A lawsuit had been filed by Donovan, the former financial director who had tried to deceive Edward months earlier. From his new law firm, he accused Langford Corporation of wrongful termination and defamation. The news spread quickly, stirring tension throughout the company. Reporters camped outside the building, hungry for drama. Maria read the documents carefully. The accusations were elaborate but full of holes. "He is trying to rewrite the truth," she said quietly. Edward nodded. "And he is counting on us being afraid to fight." They gathered evidence from the audit files, each document meticulously preserved under Maria's system. The little notebook that once began it all had become the foundation of their defense. When the trial opened, the courtroom was packed. Donovan sat across the aisle, his arrogance untouched by time. Maria took the stand as the company's key witness. Her voice was calm and clear. As she recounted the day, she whispered, "Do not sign that." The opposing lawyer tried to rattle her, questioning her credibility. "You were a janitor, were you not? You had no training in finance or law. Why should anyone believe that you understood what you saw?" Maria met his eyes. "Because truth does not need a degree to be recognized. It only needs someone willing to speak it." The courtroom fell silent. Edward felt a surge of pride he could not hide. When the verdict finally came, it was swift. Donovan's claims were dismissed and his remaining assets were frozen for restitution. Justice had spoken again, this time in the open. Outside, the courthouse cameras flashed as Edward faced the press. He motioned to Maria beside him. "This company stands because one woman had the courage to act when no one else would. We owe her more than we can ever repay." Later that evening, as the city lights shimmered across the river, Maria sat alone on a park bench. The night air was warm, filled with the sounds of life continuing. She closed her eyes for a moment, breathing in peace. Everything she had endured, the whispers, the doubts, the fear, had led to this quiet victory. When she opened her eyes, she saw Edward walking toward her, 2 cups of coffee in hand. He sat beside her without a word. Together they watched the skyline glow against the dark. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked softly. Maria shook her head. "No. Doing what is right may not make life easier, but it always makes it honest." And for the first time since that fateful day, they both allowed themselves to simply sit in silence, not the silence of fear, but the kind that comes after truth has finally been spoken. The weeks following the trial felt lighter, as if the entire company had exhaled after holding its breath for too long. Langford Corporation began to thrive again, not just in profit but in purpose. The Integrity Project expanded internationally, and Maria Alvarez was invited to lead a global ethics conference in New York. It was the kind of recognition she never dreamed of. When she received the letter, she stood by her office window for a long moment, smiling quietly to herself. Edward Langford entered her office carrying 2 coffee cups, as he always did. "You got the invitation," he said, reading her expression. "Yes," she replied softly. "But it still feels unreal." "It is not unreal," he said. "It is the result of everything you stood for." Their friendship had deepened into something steady and unspoken, a bond of 2 people who had walked through fire together and come out stronger. He admired her humility. She respected his willingness to listen. It was not romance, not exactly, but a connection grounded in shared belief. In the weeks leading up to the conference, Maria worked tirelessly preparing her speech about truth in leadership. She titled it, "The Smallest Voice in the Room." Edward insisted on attending, saying simply, "You should not stand alone on that stage." When the day arrived, the conference hall gleamed with crystal lights. Executives, journalists, and policymakers filled the seats. As Maria stepped up to the podium, Edward sat in the front row, nodding encouragement. Her hands trembled for only a second before she began. "Years ago," she said, her voice echoing through the hall, "I was invisible. I cleaned floors, no one noticed, in rooms where decisions worth millions were made. But one day I saw something wrong. And for the first time I spoke. I thought I would lose everything. Instead, I found my voice, and it changed my life." The audience listened in stillness. She continued, "Integrity is not born in power. It is born in silence, in those moments when no one is watching. When you choose to act with honesty, you give others permission to do the same." When she finished, the room rose in applause. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted her name, and for a moment she felt overwhelmed. But as she looked down at Edward, she saw him smiling proudly, and her heart steadied. She realized then that this was never about fame, it was about giving others courage. After the event, they walked along the Hudson River under the soft lights of the city. Edward broke the silence first. "You know," he said, "when you warned me not to sign that paper, I thought you were just afraid. But now I see you were fearless." Maria smiled gently. "Fearless? No, Edward. I was terrified. But courage is not the absence of fear, it is the choice to speak anyway." He looked at her, his expression warm. "You changed more than my company, Maria. You changed me." The wind carried the faint sound of music from a distant pier. Maria looked out over the dark water, shimmering beneath the city lights. "Maybe that is how change works," she said quietly. "One whisper at a time." They stood there together in silence, the skyline behind them glowing like a promise. The world was vast and loud, yet somehow it felt intimate. For both of them, it was no longer about power titles or wealth. It was about the unshakable truth that had started with one small act of courage and had grown into something far greater than either of them could have imagined. Autumn returned, soft and golden, marking 1 full year since the day Maria Alvarez had stood in that boardroom and whispered the words that changed everything. The leaves outside Langford Tower drifted down like slow rain, covering the streets in amber light. From the top floor, Maria watched the city hum below, reflecting on a journey that still felt almost unreal. Langford Corporation had become a model for ethical business across the country. Other companies followed their example, adopting similar programs built on transparency and kindness. Inside the tower, people worked differently, now more open, more willing to listen. The fear that once hung in the air had disappeared. In its place was something stronger: trust. Edward Langford walked into her office carrying a framed plaque. "It came this morning," he said with a proud smile. "The State Business Council has named Langford Corporation the most ethical company of the year." He placed the plaque on her desk. "This belongs to you as much as it belongs to me." Maria touched the frame, her eyes soft. "We built this together, Edward. You gave me a chance when no one else would." He shook his head. "No, Maria. You gave me back my company's soul." That evening, they held a small celebration in the lobby where it had all begun. Employees gathered not as workers and executives, but as a family. Laughter echoed through the marble halls. Someone had arranged a display near the entrance, a simple glass case with Maria's old cleaning badge and her black notebook resting inside. A sign beneath it read, "Integrity begins with courage." As Maria stood before it, she felt tears sting her eyes. That notebook, once filled with scribbles and evidence, had become a symbol of everything she believed in. Edward joined her side quietly. I wanted everyone who walks through those doors to remember how this company was saved, he said. Not by contracts or profits, but by truth. Maria smiled through her tears. It feels strange seeing that little book behind glass. It used to fit in my pocket. Later that night, as the crowd thinned and the city lights shimmered through the tall windows, Maria stepped outside for a moment of quiet. The autumn air was cool against her skin. She looked up at the tower rising above her and thought about how far she had come from scrubbing its floors to standing at its heart. Lucas called just then. "Mom," he said, "I saw the news." "I am proud of you." She smiled into the phone. "I am proud of you too, mijo. Always do what is right, even when no one is watching." "I will," he promised. When she hung up, Edward was standing by the door, hands in his coat pockets. "Heading home?" he asked. "Yes," she said softly. "For once, I think the company will be fine without me for the night." He smiled. "It will be because of you." They stood together for a moment, watching the lights flicker in the glass above. Then Maria turned toward the street, her steps calm and certain. The story that began with a whisper had become a legacy. One woman's act of courage had rippled far beyond a single office or city. It had reminded everyone who heard it that power without integrity is hollow, and that sometimes the smallest voice can carry the strength to change the world.